In the early morning hours of September 18th, guard Robert Payne began his usual rounds through the women's block of Magnolia Bay Prison. The day promised to unfold just like every other. Cell checks, breakfast distribution, routine procedures. That expectation shattered when he reached cell number 237, home to inmate Maria Ramirez. "Wake up, Ramirez," he called, tapping his keys against the bars. No response. The woman lay motionless on her bunk, turned toward the wall. A cold feeling crept up Robert's spine. He unlocked the door and stepped cautiously inside. When he touched her shoulder, he jerked his hand back. Her body was stiff and cold. "Code blue in cell block C," he shouted into his walkie-talkie, triggering the emergency protocol. 20 minutes later, Maria Ramirez's cell had become a crime scene. The prison doctor pronounced her dead, estimating the time of death to be around midnight. The 34-year-old inmate lay in bed with no visible signs of struggle or injury. It might have passed for a natural death if not for the faint bluish stains on her neck and wrists. Warden Lorraine Wilson ordered the police and the medical examiner to be called immediately. Her face remained unreadable, but the concern in her eyes betrayed her. Detective Daniel Fischer arrived at Magnolia Bay shortly after 9. Tall, broad-shouldered, and precise in his movements, he carried the bearing of a man shaped by military discipline. His gray eyes held a sharp intelligence, and his reputation for persistence preceded him. He was greeted by Warden Wilson, a stern woman in a tailored suit, her graying hair pulled into a severe bun. "We've kept the scene intact, Detective," she said, leading him through the checkpoint. "Good," Fischer replied, pulling out his notebook. Maria Ramirez was serving a 5-year sentence for fraud and forgery. Exemplary behavior. No incidents until today, Wilson continued. Fischer nodded silently, jotting notes as they entered the cell. Forensic scientist Tom Green was already there, crouched beside the bed, finishing a preliminary examination. "What do we have, Tom?" Fischer asked, slipping on a pair of gloves. "At first glance, looks like strangulation," Green said. "Probably with a soft object, maybe a pillow. What's strange is there's no sign of a struggle. Nothing under her nails. No bruises from resistance. Almost as if she didn't fight back or was unconscious." Fischer scanned the cell carefully. It was small, barely 3 by 2 meters, containing a bunk, a bolted metal table, a sink, and a toilet. On the table sat a few books, some photographs, and neatly folded letters. "Something's off," he muttered, kneeling by the bunk. "It's too orderly. Like someone cleaned up before she died." A damp spot on the bedsheet near where Maria's head had rested caught his attention. "Tom, check that out," he said. Green applied a reagent, watching it change color. "Caliva," he confirmed. "Could be vomit or froth. We'll need a toxicology report." Another detail caught Fischer's eye. Faint scratches on the floor near the bed, as if something heavy had been moved recently. Within an hour, Maria's body was transported to the morgue for autopsy, and Fischer began questioning staff. Robert Payne, the guard who had found the body, was first. His fingers tapped nervously against his desk as he spoke. "She was quiet," Payne said. "Kept to herself. Never caused trouble. Lately, though, she seemed cheerful." "Cheerful?" Fischer raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, smiling more. Humming to herself sometimes. That was new." Next, Fischer questioned the night guard, James Montgomery, a middle-aged man with calm, unreadable eyes. "Did you notice anything unusual?" Fischer asked. Montgomery tensed slightly before answering. Everything was normal. Checked her cell at 2200 hours. She was reading. At 2300 hours, lights out. Quiet after that. "And you didn't check again until when?" "Rounds are every 2 hours. Passed by at 1 in the morning. Cell was dark. Silent." Something in Montgomery's tone unsettled Fischer, though he couldn't yet say why. He decided to hold off on pressing further until the autopsy report came in. By evening, Tom Green called with an update. "Daniel, cause of death confirmed. Strangulation. But there's something else," he said. "She was pregnant. About 12 weeks. Fischer let out a low whistle. "That's an interesting twist. Anyone in the prison know about it?" "Apparently not," Green said. No mention in her medical file. Either she hid it or someone wiped the records. The following morning, Fischer returned to question Angela Perez, Maria's cellmate. A thin woman with sharp features and tired eyes, Angela was hesitant until Fischer mentioned the pregnancy. Did she tell you? Angela asked suddenly. No, Fischer replied. The autopsy did. Did you know? Angela looked around nervously before speaking. She told me a month ago. She was scared but happy. Do you know who the father was? Fischer asked gently. Angela's eyes lowered. That's dangerous information, detective. I can protect you, Fischer insisted. But I need the truth. After a long silence, Angela whispered, One of the guards. I don't know who. They met in the laundry room at night. He promised to help her get parole. The last time she saw him was the night before she died. She came back upset, said she had hope for a new life. That revelation shifted the entire investigation. Fischer requested the surveillance tapes, only to be told they were unavailable. The system had been under maintenance for the past 3 days. Strange coincidence, don't you think? Fischer said in the warden's office. Lorraine Wilson maintained a composed expression. We do routine maintenance quarterly, detective. Nothing suspicious. Then maybe you can explain how an inmate got pregnant in your facility? Fischer countered. Or is that part routine maintenance too? Her face tightened, but she quickly regained control. I won't discuss unverified rumors. If you have formal allegations, send them through the DA. They're not rumors. They're autopsy results. Fischer shot back. I want the list of everyone who had access to cell block C on the night of September 17th. Fine, Wilson said stiffly, but proceed with caution. This institution's reputation is already at stake. The list included James Montgomery, 2 other guards, and a nurse who made late-night medication rounds. Fischer intended to re-interview Montgomery, but learned he had taken sudden leave for a family emergency. Calls to his home went unanswered. It was clear there was more buried behind Magnolia Bay's walls than anyone was willing to admit. I'm not leaving until I find the truth, Fischer told Angela Perez before departing. For Maria and her unborn child. Angela met his gaze. Be careful, detective. In this place, everything is eyes and ears. As Fischer exited the prison, he caught one of the guards watching him. Their eyes met briefly before the man turned away. Fischer's instincts told him he was getting closer to truth and closer to danger. That night, back in his office, he spread Maria Ramirez's file across the desk. Photographs, police records, court transcripts, fragments of a life that ended too soon. Maria Ramirez had been born in San Antonio, Texas, to Mexican immigrant parents. Her father worked construction. Her mother cleaned motel rooms. She'd attended high school, studied accounting in college, but dropped out due to financial hardship. A string of low-paying jobs followed, then a short-lived marriage to Jorge Ramirez, ending in divorce after 3 years. Maria Ramirez's first arrest came at age 28, petty fraud. She'd forged an employer's check, received probation, and later moved to New Orleans in search of a new start. There, she found work as a secretary at the law firm of Bennett and Associates. Fischer frowned as he reviewed the details of her final conviction. Maria had been found guilty of orchestrating a series of frauds using her firm's client records. She created fake accounts and transferred money into shell companies, an operation totaling nearly $150,000 in losses. Too sophisticated a scheme for a secretary without formal training, Fischer muttered under his breath. His attention shifted to the name of Maria's attorney, Richard Bennett, the son of the firm's owner. It struck him as strange that the very family affected by her crimes had supplied her with legal defense. Stranger still, Bennett Jr.'s efforts had earned Maria only 5 years in prison, when she could have faced 15. Fischer jotted the name down in his notebook. Maybe she wasn't the real culprit, he thought. Maybe she was a scapegoat. Next, he turned his attention to James Montgomery. Calling the prison's HR department, he requested Montgomery's personnel file. Is he still missing? Fischer asked a female employee on the line. Yeah, she replied. He took a week's leave, said it was a family emergency. That's a strange coincidence, Fischer remarked, right after an inmate dies in his block. The personnel file painted a modest picture. 12 years in the correctional system, 5 at Magnolia Bay, divorced, no children, living in the New Orleans suburbs. No military record. Solid references. Fischer drove to Montgomery's listed address. The one-story home sat on a quiet street, neat but empty. He knocked. No answer. Across the yard, an elderly neighbor watering her flowers looked up. "Haven't seen him in days," she said. "Usually he's out front by 7. Always says hello. But since Monday, his car's been gone," leaving his card with her. Fischer asked to be contacted if Montgomery returned. Back at the station, he received unexpected news. Montgomery had just walked into precinct, asking to speak with the detective handling the Maria Ramirez case. When Fischer entered the interrogation room, the guard sat slumped at the table, his fingers drumming nervously against metal. He looked exhausted, red-eyed, unshaven, his composure frayed. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Montgomery," Fischer said, switching on the recorder. "You wanted to talk to me?" "I heard you were looking for me," Montgomery replied. "And I know how it looks, me disappearing right after what happened to Maria." "What does it look like?" Fischer asked evenly. "An admission of guilt?" Montgomery exhaled shakily. "I didn't kill her, detective. I swear I didn't. But you were more familiar with her than your position allows, weren't you?" Fischer pressed. Montgomery lowered his head, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, we had a relationship. I know I broke every rule, risked everything, but I loved her. And you knew she was pregnant?" "Yes," he admitted, his voice trembling. "She told me 2 weeks before she died. I was shocked, but happy. We were making plans. I'd even applied for a transfer, so when she got out, we could start fresh." "Then why run?" Fischer asked sharply. "I panicked," Montgomery said. "You don't understand. I was the last person to see her alive. We met in the laundry room, like always. She was excited that night. Said she found something big, something that could reduce her sentence. Something about her case and the people who framed her." Fischer leaned forward. "What kind of information?" "She didn't say exactly. Just that it was dangerous. She wanted to speak with her old lawyer, Bennett, first. They were supposed to meet the next day, which never happened," Fischer noted. "Right. I got off shift at 2 a.m., handed over to Harry Peterson. Maria was alive when I left her. Why should I believe you?" "Because I had no reason to hurt her." Montgomery's voice cracked. "I love Maria. We were having a child, planning a future." Fischer studied him for a long moment, eyes narrowing. "I'll verify your story. Until then, don't leave town." After the interrogation, Fischer turned his attention to Maria's finances. He obtained her bank records and immediately noticed a pattern: a $500 deposit made monthly from an entity listed as a prisoner support fund. The problem was, no such fund existed. "Someone's been sending her money under the radar," Fischer murmured, taking notes. Stranger still, a week before her death, a $10,000 deposit had appeared. Source untraceable. Determined to dig deeper, Fischer returned to Magnolia Bay Prison to re-examine Maria's cell. This time, his sharp eye caught something new. One leg of the metal table was slightly shorter than the others. "Hand me a screwdriver," he told the officer beside him. Inside the hollow leg, wrapped carefully in plastic, he found a small notebook, Maria Ramirez's diary. Back at his desk, Fischer began reading. The first entries described daily prison life, schedules, routines, and petty grievances. But a year into her sentence, the tone shifted. "Saw Wilson talking to that man again today. Money passed right there at her office. No one notices, but I see it. The packages come every Tuesday. White van with laundromat logo. But it's not laundry. Not laundry at all. James doesn't know anything. He's a good man. I want to keep it that way." The final entry, dated the night before her death, made Fischer's pulse quicken. "I found proof. Documents from accounting. Copies of transfer confirmations. Bennett was right. They used me as a scapegoat. But now I can clear my name. Tomorrow everything changes. For me, for our baby, for James, Fischer closed a notebook slowly, the pieces beginning to align in his mind. Maria had stumbled upon a corruption scheme within the prison, and possibly evidence linking back to her original fraud case. Over the next few days, Fischer conducted quiet surveillance on Magnolia Bay. On Tuesday morning, just as the diary described, a white van marked Bay Fresh Laundry rolled in through the gates at exactly 10 a.m. and left half an hour later. He followed it to a warehouse on the edge of town, registered to Southern Supply. A quick records check revealed its owner, Marcus Bennett, father of Richard Bennett, the attorney who had represented Maria. Too many coincidences, Fischer muttered, staring at the file. He arranged a meeting with Richard Bennett at his downtown office. The young lawyer received him with professional courtesy but visible tension. Maria Ramirez, Fischer began. Bennett exhaled slowly. Yes, I represented her. Smart woman, wrong crowd. Did you stay in contact after her conviction? Fischer asked. Occasionally, Bennett replied, fidgeting. Professional follow-up, you could say. I like to keep tabs on my clients. Even the ones who stole from your father? Fischer countered. Bennett hesitated, then smiled thinly. Especially those. Everyone deserves a second chance. You had a meeting scheduled with her on the day she died. Why? The lawyer's face went pale. How did you? That's privileged information. She's dead, Mr. Bennett. Confidentiality doesn't outweigh a homicide investigation. Bennett was silent for a long moment, then sighed. She said she'd found proof of her innocence. Claimed she'd been framed. But she never came to our meeting, so I assumed she'd changed her mind. You didn't think it strange that she disappeared? It's prison, detective. These things happen. Fischer didn't buy it, but he held his tongue. One more question. What do you know about Southern Supply? Bennett froze. That's my father's business. Why? Just curiosity, Fischer said, standing. Thank you for your time. As he left, he was certain the lawyer was hiding something. Maybe Maria had gotten too close to the truth, and someone made sure she never talked. Fischer's next step was to connect the dots between the laundromat van, Southern Supply, and Magnolia Bay. He filed for a warrant to search the warehouse, but hit an immediate wall. Judge Harrison denied the request, citing insufficient grounds. Fischer knew better. Harrison was known for his ties to several powerful New Orleans families, including the Bennetts. Cut off from official channels, the detective turned to his trusted contact in narcotics. Check this address quietly, he said, handing over the location of the Southern Supply warehouse. No paperwork, no noise. A day later, the informant called back. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, Daniel. That warehouse you asked about, it's already under surveillance, but not by our department. The feds are running their own operation. They're investigating a major money laundering and drug trafficking network, and your Magnolia Bay Prison is one of the links in that chain. The feds, Fischer muttered. Why aren't they coordinating with local law enforcement? Because they suspect that some high-ranking New Orleans police officers are part of the scheme, the informant warned. Be careful, Daniel. You're digging too deep. The revelation explained a lot, especially why Maria's case had been stalling. If she had stumbled upon evidence of a larger corruption network involving powerful figures, her life would have been in danger long before her death. Fischer returned to Maria's diary, reading every entry again, this time searching for hidden clues, names, places, connections. One particular note caught his attention. Saw a new shipment today. Boxes labeled medical supplies. They were taken to Office D in the administration wing. There, a man in a suit everyone calls the judge receives them. The detective froze, recalling that Judge Harrison, the same man who had denied his search warrant, often attended charity events for Magnolia Bay inmates. The puzzle was beginning to come together. The prison, Fischer realized, was being used as a transit point for narcotics disguised as medical supplies. Lorraine Wilson, the warden, was clearly in on it. Southern Supply, owned by Marcus Bennett, provided the transport, and Judge Harrison ensured legal protection. But how did Maria Ramirez fit into all of this? Perhaps her earlier fraud involving Bennett's company records was tied to the same money laundering ring. And when she was sent to prison, she uncovered the operation by accident, making her a threat that needed to be silenced. Fischer decided to share his suspicions with the New Orleans police captain, but chose his words carefully, mindful of the informant's warning. "I have reason to believe Maria Ramirez's death is connected to a drug smuggling operation running through Magnolia Bay Prison," Fischer reported. The captain frowned. "That's a serious accusation, detective. Do you have evidence?" The diary of the deceased, the guard Montgomery's testimony, unusual transactions in Ramirez's account, and a possible connection to a federal investigation. "The feds." The captain stiffened. "Have you been in contact with them?" "No," Fischer said evenly. "But I've learned they're conducting a parallel inquiry." "Keep working," the captain replied, his tone suddenly guarded. "But tread carefully. I don't want us interfering with a federal case, if one even exists." Leaving the captain's office, Fischer couldn't shake the feeling that his superior was hiding something. Maybe the informant had been right. Maybe the rot ran deeper than he thought. At home that night, Fischer spread the case files across his dining table, studying every photo, report, and note. Maria's death, her pregnancy, the relationship with Montgomery, the drug ring, the corruption. Everything was connected, but how? His gaze drifted to a mugshot of Maria taken during her first arrest. She had intelligent eyes, a quiet strength in her expression. She didn't look like a criminal, more like someone caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. "I'll find the truth, Maria," Fischer promised softly, "whatever it takes." The next morning, a call from the lab broke the silence. The toxicology expert had surprising news. Maria Ramirez's blood contained traces of a sedative not listed among her prescribed medications, the expert said. "A dose strong enough to knock someone out completely." "That explains the absence of struggle," Fischer murmured. "Who had access to those medications in the prison?" "According to protocol, only the medical staff and the warden. Guards have no direct access." That narrowed the suspect list. Maria's death wasn't spontaneous. It was orchestrated. Fischer decided to revisit the night shift from the day of the murder. In addition to James Montgomery, the nurse on duty had been Sandra Collins. Without delay, Fischer drove to the prison to speak with her. Sandra, a jittery middle-aged woman, stiffened the moment she saw him. "I've already given my statement," she said quickly, avoiding eye contact. There was nothing unusual that night. "Did you administer sleeping pills to Maria Ramirez?" Fischer asked directly. Sandra's face went pale. "No, she didn't have a prescription for sedatives." "That's strange," Fischer said. "Toxicology found a large amount of zolpidem in her system. How do you explain that?" The nurse fidgeted with the hem of her uniform. "I don't know. Maybe she got unofficially. Some inmates trade medication, or someone on staff might have slipped it to her off the record." Fischer's tone hardened. "You're already in trouble, Sandra. A woman is dead. If you're withholding information, that makes you an accessory to murder." Sandra hesitated, then exhaled shakily. "That night, Miss Wilson called me into her office," she confessed. "She said Ramirez was agitated and might hurt herself. She ordered me to give her a sedative. I administered the standard dose and noted it in the dispensing log, but not in Maria's medical record. Miss Wilson said she'd make the entry herself. The next day, the log was gone. When I asked about it, I was told it had been destroyed as part of protocol." The confession confirmed Fischer's suspicions. Lorraine Wilson had directly interfered with Maria's treatment and possibly arranged her death. But was she the killer or someone's puppet? Fischer decided to follow one final lead. The documents Maria had mentioned in her diary, the ones she said could prove her innocence. If she had truly found them, they had to be hidden somewhere close. Back in her cell, Fischer conducted a meticulous search. Inch by inch, he examined every surface until a small crack near the ventilation grate caught his attention. The mortar had been tampered with. "Get me a flashlight and something thin," he told the guard. Using a pair of tweezers, Fischer pulled out a plastic-wrapped bundle from the crevice. Inside were folded papers, copies of wire transfers, receipts, and memos. Each showed large sums being funneled through Southern Supply, then distributed to accounts tied to the prison administration. One document stood out, A transfer order for $100,000 to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The signature on it belonged to Lorraine Wilson. Armed with this evidence, Fischer went straight to the warden's office. Lorraine Wilson greeted him coolly. "What can I do for you, detective?" "Making progress in your investigation." "More than that," Fischer said, laying the documents across her desk. "Care to explain these transactions, Miss Wilson?" Her face stiffened, though she quickly composed herself. "These are confidential prison documents." "Where did you get them?" "They were hidden in Maria Ramirez's cell," Fischer replied. "The same inmate who died after you personally ordered her to be sedated without proper record." "Care to explain that, too?" "These are serious allegations," Wilson said evenly, though her eyes flickered with unease. "Do you have proof beyond a nervous nurse and a few pieces of questionable paperwork?" "There's also Maria's diary," Fischer countered. "She documented the smuggling ring you've been running right under everyone's nose." "There's James Montgomery's testimony," Fischer began, "that Maria was going to meet with an attorney to hand over evidence proving her innocence, and the toxicology results confirmed the violent nature of her death." Warden Wilson was silent for a moment, her eyes distant as she contemplated the situation. Finally, she exhaled slowly. "You don't realize what you've gotten yourself into, detective. This is much bigger than the death of one inmate." "Then explain it to me," Fischer pressed. "Magnolia Bay is just a small piece of the system," Wilson said. "Drug operations, money laundering. It's all controlled by people you'll never reach. Judges, prosecutors, politicians. Too many powerful hands in play. And you decided to join this lucrative business too?" Fischer asked. "I didn't have a choice," Wilson snapped. "When I was appointed 5 years ago, the system was already in place. They simply explained the rules of the game to me." "And Maria knew those rules," Fischer replied sharply. "And she was smart enough to collect evidence." "She shouldn't have poked her nose where it didn't belong," Wilson muttered. "That foolish girl thought she could use what she knew to buy an early release. She had no idea what forces she was up against." "So you killed her?" Fischer asked coldly. Wilson looked genuinely offended. "Me? No, detective. I did order her sedated because I was told to, but I didn't go near her cell that night." "Then who did?" The warden hesitated, her silence heavy. At last, she said, "If you really want the truth, talk to Richard Bennett. He came to the prison the night before Maria died, registered as her lawyer, but their meeting wasn't in the visiting room. It was in my office." Fischer's brow furrowed. Bennett hadn't mentioned any prison visit when they spoke. Why would he kill his former client? "Because his father runs the whole operation," Wilson said. "And because Maria knew too much about the Bennett family. She wasn't just a client. She was Richard's mistress once. He got her involved in a forgery scheme and set her up when the case drew too much attention." It all began to make sense. Maria Ramirez had been the scapegoat in a fraudulent network orchestrated by the Bennetts. Her pregnancy by a prison guard had become the final threat, something Richard Bennett couldn't afford. "Do you have proof Bennett was in the prison that night?" Fischer demanded. "CCTV footage," Wilson answered. "But it's stored on a secure server accessible only to me and state security." "I'll get a warrant for those tapes," Fischer said firmly. "In the meantime, you're under arrest for accessory to murder and corruption." He called for backup. Lorraine Wilson didn't resist as she was taken into custody. She seemed to know the game was over, with a warrant in hand. Fischer retrieved the surveillance recordings. Sure enough, the cameras showed Richard Bennett arriving at the prison around 7 p.m. the night before Maria's death. He spent roughly an hour in the warden's office. Later, another camera in the corridor of C Block caught him walking with guard around 11 p.m. The camera near Maria's cell had been switched off for maintenance, but one position further down the hall captured Bennett, leaving 20 minutes later, armed with irrefutable evidence. Fischer obtained a warrant for Bennett's arrest. The seizure team arrived at Bennett's law office early the next morning. The attorney looked stunned as the detective presented the warrant. "This is some kind of mistake," Bennett muttered, being handcuffed. "The only mistake," Fischer replied, "was underestimating Maria Ramirez. She was smarter than you thought." At the station, Faced with video evidence and Wilson's confession, Bennett finally broke down. "You don't understand," he said hoarsely. "She threatened to ruin everything. The business, my family's reputation. She had my letters admitting to fraud. When she got pregnant by that guard, she thought she had leverage, the baby and the evidence. She was ready to destroy it all. So, you gave her sleeping pills," Fischer finished coldly, "and then smothered her with a pillow. Cold-blooded murder." "I was protecting my family," Bennett insisted. "You can't prove anything against my father. He has too many connections. But Fischer had already handed over the evidence to federal agents running a parallel investigation. Within days, a massive drug and corruption network spanning several states was dismantled. Marcus Bennett, Richard's father, was arrested at his country home. Judge Harrison, the one who had denied Fischer's earlier warrant, was taken into custody as well. A scheme that had thrived for years collapsed like a house of cards. James Montgomery was dismissed from the prison system for his inappropriate relationship with an inmate, but avoided prosecution. His testimony became crucial in convicting the Bennetts and Wilson. Angela Perez, Maria's cellmate and closest friend, was granted parole in recognition of her assistance. 3 months later, the court delivered its verdicts. Richard Bennett received a life sentence for first-degree murder. Lorraine Wilson was sentenced to 15 years for corruption and being an accessory after the fact. Marcus Bennett and Judge Harrison also received lengthy prison terms for organizing a criminal enterprise. On the day of the verdict, Fischer visited Maria Ramirez's grave, a modest stone in a quiet, low-income cemetery. He laid a bouquet of wildflowers and whispered, "Justice has been served, Maria. Now you can rest in peace." As he walked away, the detective reflected on how easily the system could crush an individual, especially someone without power or protection. Maria had been victimized not only by her murderer, but by a machine designed to silence those who threatened it. Magnolia Bay Prison was temporarily shut down for a full audit and reorganization. The new administration promised reforms and improved inmate safety. Fischer knew better. Systemic corruption wasn't something you defeated. It was something you fought piece by piece, case by case. James Montgomery found work as a private security guard in another state. He occasionally wrote to Fischer, sharing news about his quiet new life and his efforts to move on from a tragedy that had taken the woman he loved. Angela Perez started a small support group for former inmates, helping them rebuild their lives. She often spoke of Maria as a woman who, even in death, had managed to bring change. Detective Daniel Fischer was promoted to head a new law enforcement corruption unit. The Maria Ramirez case had taught him to never take the obvious at face value, and to always search for the hidden motives beneath every crime. In the archives of the New Orleans Police Department, a new file appeared, Case 438, Maria Ramirez. Inside were photographs, reports, interview transcripts, and a small tattered diary. The story of a woman who wanted a new beginning, but instead uncovered a criminal empire that consumed her city. It was a story of justice, delayed but not denied. In Fischer's office, a new photograph hung on the wall, a snapshot of a smiling Latina woman taken months before her arrest. A hopeful Maria Ramirez, unaware of the role she would play in New Orleans history. Sometimes, on long nights, Fischer would look up from his desk at that photograph, as if seeking guidance from the woman whose death had changed his life. And in those quiet moments, it almost seemed as if Maria was smiling approvingly back at him. If you're drawn to stories like this, where love, betrayal, and obsession collide, be sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time.